There's an infectious rugby gees in the air as the Springboks test season takes off following a win over the Barbarians. The boys in green and gold head to Loftus next to take on the Italians, and it offers the Springboks scrum coach and his budding forwards crucial test time.
The key thing with the Boks is building a 40-man squad, not a 23, but a 40-man squad that will allow you to have players who are on the periphery to actually become starters. And I think if you go back to the England semi-final, even the France quarter-final for that, for a matter of fact, you look at the differences in the benches and you realize that's where the Springboks won those two playoff games.
We chat Bok depth, Rassie's new hybrid player, and pricey match tickets with News 24 Sports' Kanyiso Chwaku next. Later in the show, conflict in the Middle East means you'll pay more for fuel from Wednesday. And finally, a kidnapped Cape Town baby is found and a woman is in police handcuffs.
To know when the next episode drops, hit the like, follow and subscribe buttons on our YouTube, Spotify and Apple Podcast channels.
Stay tuned until the show's end to hear your voice notes. If you'd like to engage us on this episode's topics, you can do so sending us your thoughts and opinions to our official The Lead WhatsApp line. That number 072 562 3179. My name's Graham Robenheimer. Let's chat rugby and more right here on The Lead on News 24. The Springbok Test season, while it's in full swing with a convincing win over the Barbarians, a first on South African soil this past weekend. Now, the Boks sights are set firmly on sinking Italy and Georgia in quick succession, with the matchups offering the front lineup, in particular, a considerable challenge here. Building depth among the forwards is most definitely key, according to News 24 Sports' Kanyiso Chwaku. The senior sports journalist joins us live now from our Johannesburg studios. Kanyiso, thank you so much for joining us on The Lead. I really appreciate it.
Good day, Graham. Hope it could have been warmer, but it is what it is. It's winter after all.
What did you think of Saturday? Any standout moments from the Barbars game? Who were the key players for you?
So it was Asenath Nkabaganye, Nietling Fouché, Marius van der Merwe, and Vincent Chituka. All forwards. They all did well. I think the biggest shock was how Andre Esterhuizen was deployed at loose forward. Play center has been deployed by the Sharks in previous years as a loose forward, but in an emergency issue. And judging from what Don Heeman said at Monday's press conference, also judging from what Rassie said in the post-match press conference on Saturday, it becomes very clear that there is a sustained role for Andre Esterhuizen, especially as a utility player. So they call him a hybrid player.
Yes, this is what I wanted to ask. He's a center turned flanker, right? What is this hybrid player? Because now obviously we've got international coaches and rugby pundits tongues wagging about this particular title. What does this mean to the lay rugby fan?
Look, it's effectively a utility player, but it's just a fancy word. Look, remember that Rassie does have a very good command of English. So, the use of the word hybrid is effectively just another term for a utility player. If you look at a guy like Albertus Kwagga-Smith, he can play any position. The loose forward can also play wing. He's got sevens experience. The thing now with an Andre Esterhuizen is always that bulk, and that bulk hasn't always been well utilized at 12. But there were times that when the Sharks needed someone at flank, they're probably the best option. It's scrum there, but probably not as carry as much be used in the lineouts and in mauls. But I think the Boks are very intentional in terms of how they want to use Andre Esterhuizen's bulk. Don did say that Andre is bigger than some of their flanks, so it actually makes sense for them to deploy Andre Esterhuizen at flank when the need arises. But what that now does, it actually changes the parameters of how the Boks use their bench, because they could go of 8-0. Remember, whatever happens with the selection of your 8 players on the bench, you need to have 3 tight forwards. That's your reserve hooker, your reserve loser, probably reserve tight prop. But from numbers 19 downwards, which is generally 19 is lock, 20 is your loose forward lock, 21 is your scrum off, 22 or 23 are your utility backs. They could ordinarily just mess around with them. And remember, a key player in that is also a Cheslin Colby, because Cheslin can pretty much play anywhere in the back line. He can play fullback, wing, fly off, scrum off, but probably the only position I think he may not be able to play He is outside center because at 12, I mean, look, he ran over Ricky Telly on Saturday. So either way, you can deploy him at 12 because one, he's got the defensive wherewithal. Two, he's got the physical go forward wherewithal. So 13 is a bit of a different defensive baby. That's probably one of the key specialist positions in rugby. So if you've got a Chesley and Colby playing in the back line, you actually sometimes may not need to pick a reserve scrum off because if you now need someone to go deep at scrum off, you've got him because he can pass, kick, run.
I loved the quick change-ups in kicks to goalposts. It was fantastic to see Marnie getting a little bit more time. Obviously, Sasha getting a chance, and, they were fantastic. What did you, of course, it didn't take us very long to get to talk about Sasha. What did you take home about his performance on the field? I felt like that one dummy attempt was almost beautiful, but I feel like his jets weren't firing on full blast just yet.
Look, it is a Barbarians test where most probably you'd expect the Barbarians to razzle, dazzle, and sizzle. The weather didn't allow for that to happen. So I think the Boks with the superior pack were then able to put their best backline front foot forward. But from a form perspective, you also want to see the guys easing themselves in instead of actually just firing up from the marks very early because if you think about it, the test season is not going to be easy. Australia are currently hosting the British and Irish Lions, and regardless of where Australian rugby is at the moment, the fact that you've got a test that stern of the British and Irish Lions who won very comfortably against the Western Force on Saturday. They've got the Queensland Reds, who should be a much better side on Wednesday. You'd feel that Australia will be a very difficult side to knock over. And then secondly, South Africa are going to New Zealand for the first time for back-to-back test matches since 2010. South Africa have not won back-to-back test matches in New Zealand in a single trip since 1937. So There's that to deal with. They have done back-to-back tests, but that was across different years. That was 2008 and in 2009. And remember that they did do it in 2018, drawing 2019, but they lost in the last trip there. And they haven't played in Auckland since 2013, and New Zealand are 15-0. At Eden Park. So 50-0. Let me just make that very clear. Not 50-0. So sounds like it. I know that it sounds like a WrestleMania streak, but it is a very formidable streak. So look, it's good to see that the guys are getting game mileage under the legs, but I think from July 5th onwards, that's when you can accurately start to judge where particular players are, because Rassie did say that he's going to team for Italy 1. He's announcing that team on Tuesday at 3:45, and then that is today, and then the rest of the formalities will go through. So it's going to be interesting to see what he picks for Italy 1. He's already selected that. He said the team knows about those teams internally. Now it's just a case of to see what will transpire when the team is announced. 1 and 2, how those guys will play at Loftus on Saturday.
In my mind's eye, Kanyuso, correct me if I'm wrong, Italy seems like the stronger of the two currently. Correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah. Who do you expect to make the starting lineup when that announcement? I know we're preempting a little bit, but who do you think is definitely going to be running out on the field this coming weekend?
Probably Sia will start. He was withdrawn as a precaution with a stiff neck. I do think that I won't be surprised if Lua Diaga gets a run again. He's been absent from Test rugby for more than 2 years. Eben should be able to start. Oxenche getting a start again. Bongi Bonambi getting a start. I think it's going to be interesting at tight end. I think Vilko Low may probably get the rub of the selection green in that regard. But then one of the things that you don't want to do is to preempt selections when it comes to Rassie. I'm surprised if SFM 10. I know that sounds like a radio station, but SFM 10 should be in a position to start again. I think Faf de Klerk may get a long awaited start. He's been a bit on the periphery from a Bok perspective. I think the key question lies with how Willie Leroux will be deployed, because he's 2 tests away from his 100th. And I think those are things that, when it comes to semantics, Rassie is very attuned to those things of allowing players to have a very big moment when it comes to the 100th Test match. One needs to remember back in 2022, Andre Pollard, Eben Etzebeth, for example, volunteered himself to play against Wales in the second test of that 3-match tour with the view of playing his 100th Test match at Newlands in front of his now late father, who was already ailing at the time. And I mean, if such semantics are allowed by then coach Jacques Nienaber, and then with Rassie Erasmus as the director of rugby at the time, I do think that there could be that in particular allowance to allow a Willie Leroux to most probably get 100th test against Australia in Cape Town. That would be on the 16th of August. But then also, if you look at that particular scale, that will probably then mean that it does open up an opportunity for Apelele Fassi or Damian Willemse to start one of these two tests, and then probably give Willie Leroux a run against Georgia. That's on the 19th in Bombela. And then after that, then give him the selection dibs for the 100th test match against Australia. That would be on the 23rd, I mean, because the night actually it should be on the 23rd of August, but the 16th will be up here in Joburg.
Okay, you interviewed box scrum coach Dan Heman. He's quite revered for what he's been able to do, of course, over the last couple of years. And you know, we've seen him in Chasing the Sun and seeing his work. It's fantastic to get a closer look. What did he tell you about developing the current depth in the forwards as we forge ahead with our tests with Italy and Georgia? I thought quite interesting in your latest piece, which is on News 24's Sports front page. It's called Farming Out the Props, Why Scrum Dr. Himan Trusts the Box Depth Stress Test Process. But he did sort of say to you, hey, you know, a lot of these players are obviously playing overseas and it's hard to keep track of everybody, and everybody needs to get a turn so that they can see who the rising stars are here.
So, I mean, one of the key things, I think if you had given yourself an opportunity to listen to watch Chasing the Sun 1, Chasing the Sun 2, and also reading, I think, Lloyd Bernard's first book on Miracle Men, and also Just Twice the Glory, you'd find that the key thing with the box is building a 40-man squad, not a 23, but a 40-man squad that will allow you to have players who are on the periphery to actually become starters. And I think if you go back to the England semi-final, even the France quarterfinal for that, for a matter of fact, you look at the differences in the benches and you realize that's where the Springboks won those two playoff games. And what matters now is that you need to be able to stack up on depth, at least minimum 4 strong in each position. And that means that you need to cast your net far and wide. And sometimes far and wide will take you to a place like Lanelli Scarlets, where there's a Morris van der Merwe. And I wouldn't be surprised if at some point Jared Taylor, I don't know whether he will probably want to qualify as a Welshman. He's born, bred, battered in East London. His parents are South African. But if you're currently following the struggles of Welsh rugby, they probably want to try fast track as many overseas players as possible to strengthen their playing stocks. But back to this particular matter, the key part is that if you look at the Bok props in particular, leave the hookers aside, the Bok props. If you look at Steven Kitsoff and Frans Malherbe, they were part of the Cravenwick class of 2009/2010 in Kitsoff's case for Western Province, and those were two very strong sides. And they are now, Kitsoff's retired because of that spinal fusion that just would not allow him to play further. And with a player like Frans Malherbe, he's also got a lower back issue that whether it's debatable whether they should go for rest and to heal up or go for operation. But remember that those two players in particular have pretty much been playing professional rugby since they respectively left their Paul Roos Gymnasium and Paul Boys High. That was in 2010 and 2009.
Shout out to Paul Boys, baby. Shout out to Paul Boys. Just saying.
Yeah.
You're listening to the latest edition of The Lead on News 24 with Graham Rowenheimer. If you've got an opinion on what you've heard so far, drop us a short voice note on our WhatsApp hotline. That's 072-562-3179.
So they've grown up as teenagers and men in high competitive sports, and that will have a strain on your body. But unfortunately for them, their talents were able to thrust them into the limelight very early. But now, where do you look for talent? So I think the key part is that, and the most important part about South African rugby being able to pick players from abroad is that if there's a player who's very, very, very good and is in the Springbok selection frame, they don't have to be in South Africa for that to happen. And also remember that it lessens the wage bill significantly, because remember that we've got our currently very difficult exchange rate that puts Japan, France, England and Ireland, actually the entire Northern Hemisphere, in a position where their South African players are then probably remunerated to something that's nearer to what their worth is. So, and remember that from the Southern Hemisphere nations, it's only South Africa, Argentina who do that. Australia are only gradually going back to the New Zealand keep the players in New Zealand. They don't select outside of their shores. So what then helps in that, even if let's say you've got 3 or 4 lucid or 3 or 4 tidy props playing in South Africa, you know that that's not your only selection market. You can actually go elsewhere, like Manus van der Merwe, move from the Cheetahs to the Scarlets, played very well for the Scarlets, and then he's in Bok reckoning. You look at Jasper Wiese played for the Cheetahs, did well for the Cheetahs, but was actually picked based on what he did for the Leicester Tigers. So it's a very important part where he knows that he doesn't have to look inward for his depth selection stress test. He can actually look outwards where if there's a player who's playing very well but is limited in terms of game time from a South African franchise perspective, there will be an ease to move them overseas so that they get an opportunity to play elsewhere and then upskill themselves from an on and off the field perspective to actually ready the box for whatever opposition they play.
Excellent analysis, Kanye. So moving quickly to the stadiums itself, a lot of these tests, of course, now upcoming are being played at home. We're lucky here, South Africans. We don't just have to watch at home around the braai or the pub. We can head out into Cape Town Stadium, Loftus et al. But the big concern, of course, is now since the Barbarians game is that these allegedly overpriced tickets, right? So a lot of people are now sort of very concerned that, tickets are too expensive. If we look at the according to Ticketmaster, the upcoming game versus Italy, it's priced between 1,250 Rand and 2,500 Rand per person. Some sport pundits have been saying, hey, this is what's to blame for some of the empty seating despite the weather at Cape Town Stadium over the weekend. Your views, Kanyuso, is it too expensive? I think so for the average fan. We're living in a country where things are tight and the economy is just not, getting along as well as we would like it to be.
Look, the long and the short of it is that a lot of the revenue for the franchises, the unions, is derived from stadium sales. One, so that's why the ticket pricing is always going to be different. However, though, the Barbarians ticketing price, the Barbarians tickets, considering that Australia still have to come to Cape Town, the Cape Town Stadium had 2 test matches, probably that was an opportunity missed. I would have thought that they would have actually gone lower from a ticket price perspective to get in as many fans as possible to then raise interest for the Australia game. However, that being said, the South African SA Rugby has a ticketing model that I still need to write about. Hopefully, I'm able to pin down one of SA Rugby's CEO or the president on Thursday at a sponsorship event where they can actually just break down how they arrive at the ticketing model, because I think once you understand how the ticketing model works, because they did approve a new ticketing model at last year's at one of the key meetings that they had last year. I think the key part is now fleshing it out to readers in terms of what is constituting the rise in ticket price, because I'm fortunate enough to have actually got tickets for the Gqeberha test against Italy, and I was fortunate to get the 200 Rand ones. And those ones, the 200 Rand, the 500 and the 600 ones are the ones that sold out quickly, which are the top tier tickets. But the lower bowl tickets took a while to sell, but also because Gqeberha hasn't hosted a test match in a while, they were fortunate that those tickets sold, were able to actually generate a fair number of sales. But so what then transpires that a lot of the franchises generate a lot of their fiscus from these ticket sales. If you look at Ellis Park last year, the Lions Rugby Union,
it's no different, Kanye. So from live bands and artists these days, it's the same sort of conversation. Yeah, please continue.
Yes. So for example, the All Black test Joburg was expensive, but it was still reasonably affordable. But if you look at how much the Lions Rugby Union made, they made, I think, just over 100 million Rand from the particular test match. And then Western Province Rugby Union, they made, I think, around 80 million Rand, but their tickets were sky high. And speaking to the Stormers CEO, in trying to justify why the tickets were so high, they said that also coming to Cape Town is also forms part of a tourist package. And you have to think about the fact that flights aren't cheap. We've shrunk in terms of airliners that fly to Cape Town. Therefore, tickets are going to be spiked from a price perspective. So there's already the need to find accommodation. There's already a need to eat and then entertain yourself in Cape Town, which is why the price pointing in Cape Town is going to be rather challenging and also raising the debate. I think even here in Johannesburg, it's going to be very tricky because, as you rightly say, the economy simply does not allow for tickets to be that high. There's a comparative graph that I'm trying to research at the moment regarding the ticket prices. Hopefully, if I'm able to put the story together for Friday, it's going to be quite the price pointing from a football to a cricket to a rugby perspective is going to make for quite some interesting reading. So hopefully I'm able to put the numbers together and then actually then speak to the powers that be and just explain so that they can actually explain to us how do they arrive at the ticketing and how does that affect their bottom line.
But looking at the upcoming fixtures, no doubt September, once that rolls around, the All Blacks is going to be fantastic. Everybody's going to be champing at the bit for that. But for me, in my mind's eye, I'm quite looking forward to France and Ireland. I think later in the year, those are going to be really nail-biting stuff where we're going to be sitting on the edge of our seat. And especially Ireland, you just don't know which way the game is going to swing on the day, right?
Yeah. A lot of what's going to transpire on the end of your tour is going to be determined by what happens in the Rugby Championship. So it's lovely to get ahead of yourself and be all excited. That's very nice. However, though, I think the key part is to judge what happens. I think if South Africa would go back-to-back against New Zealand, it's going to set up the mother of all tours because, France are still hurting from that quarterfinal defeat. If you look at the reception that the sevens team got, and that was at the Olympics, you can only imagine how Paris is going to be heaving. And then one of the things about France is a country that lives on revenge. I'll just be a bit of a historian. France did not forgive Germany for the Franco-Prussian War of 1870, 1871, and that's the basis for the First World War. So you can imagine it's a country that lives on revanchism. They do not forget. They've got long memories. Their anthem is about war. So you can imagine how they are feeling about that game. I think for South Africa, Ireland, scores need to be settled, especially what transpired in the Durban Test match, where Ireland literally came out of the box flying. There was an issue with how a Franco Mostert got injured in terms of whether Ireland playing towards the letter of the law. So there's also that to worry about. So look, it's going to be very, very, very interesting. Wales is going to be interesting to see how they pan out. I think a lot will hinge on how they perform in the URC. And I think Italy will be... The next two test matches will decide how South Africa combat that test match, but they'll probably be the slightest of the speed bumps. But yes, Dublin and Paris, those are going to be club bangers.
Can you saw before we end off, obviously Rassie's always got that magic trick up his sleeve, bringing something different to the game, having all these pundits upset for, in their view, allegedly breaking the rules, but he's not. He's evolving the game. This time round, moving into 2027, what do you think is that special thing? Is it the Andre Esterhuizen hybrid player model that he's sort of being touting at the moment, or what's it in your mind's eye?
Your guess is as good as mine. The thing with Johan Rassie Rasmus is that he will put out a tarot, not a tarot card per se, but when someone flips a blackjack card and you're not quite knowing what number that is. He has a way of putting out these particular teasers, and you only start to see the picture fully play out probably around that last 2-3 months before a World Cup. If you look at how Rassie messed around with his utility players, and then all of a sudden, boom, you got that All Black test at Twickenham, 7-1. And then he continually messed around with his bench until the two big games, Ireland and New Zealand, where there were two games where he went 7-1, where you realize that the bigger conversation was never about who's starting or who's on the bench, but what is the composition of the bench. Now, what he's putting out there is actually not even the composition of the bench, but which of those players are going to be utility players, because now we still need to look at the wider selection that Rassie is going to engage in, because most probably there are players that he's identified as hybrid players just outside of Andre Esterhuizen. Now it's going to be interesting to see how he uses them, because remember, he's in a Durban DLL, it's also got a big burly 12. that he can deploy the loose forward. How he deploys them is going to be very interesting. So one of the most foolhardy things one can do in rugby writing at the moment is trying to predict Rassie Erasmus's chess moves. Yes, we're not going to be like Matt Williams and absolutely throw our toys out of the cot and saying that 8-0, 8-0 is illegal, 7-1 is illegal, 6-2 is illegal. We don't operate like that. We just sit and watch this man's documentary play out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I even saw this comment, Kanyuso, just to end off, somebody saying online, hey, when is Coach Rassie becoming professor? When is he going to become the professor of rugby? I think it's only a matter of time.
No lie. And no lie has been told that because one thing about Rassie Erasmus, he looks at the rule book. There's a line in one of the animes that I like to watch. And it speaks about living on the fringes of the law. I think it's Revi from Black Lagoon, which always speaks about living on the fringe of the laws. What Rassie does, Rassie knows the laws inside out, and especially when he works with Jaco Paper, the National Laws Advisor. So if there's one thing that duo is going to do, they will skirt the law, break it until someone talks about it.
Fantastic. And, just to stay on the anime theme, It's not even Rassie's final form, Kanyuso. It's not even his final form.
You can never know. You can never know. I mean, even now with Goku and them, they go Super Saiyan Blue, they go Super Saiyan God, they go Super Saiyan Black. There's another form that they still need to unlock. At some point, you'll defeat Beerus.
Farming out the props, why Scrum Dr. Yiman trusts the box depth stress test process. That is our very energetic, very learned, very analytical Kanyuso Chwaku, a senior sports journalist honing in on rugby for News 24 Sport. I really do appreciate your time, Kanyuso, and I'm super jealous that you're going down to Kabeja to watch the Ruggers there.
Thank you.
To our trending topic now, and sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but fuel prices are on the rise this Wednesday. It's largely due to the events in the Middle East. 93 and 95 unleaded petrol respectively will be 55 and 52 cents a litre more expensive, whilst diesel rises by between 82 and 84 cents a litre depending on its sulfur content. Oil is priced in US dollars, and with the rand hinged on the greenback, exchange rate volatility factors into these things. Our Mineral Resources Ministry says the Iran-Israel conflict mainly impacted the price jump as the Middle East accounts for a third of the world's oil supply. Illuminating paraffin also increases by 89 cents, whilst LP gas will be cheaper by 57 cents. Thanks to the News 24 business team for getting the word out so quickly.
Buying a car? Let driving with J9 steer you right.
The reason why I wanted you in today is because I want to talk about car sales. You were in that space for a few years as a salesman.
News 24's motoring podcast, hosted by Janine van der Post, delivers sharp car advice, expert test drives.
Nowadays, when somebody, for the most part, when somebody walks into a dealership, they know sometimes more about the car than the salesperson does because of the access to information.
Yeah. The latest trends and motorsport interviews, all in one smooth ride.
But I mean, these are basic questions that people really need to know. And I think at the end of the day, you just really need to do your homework.
Catch Driving with J9 on News 24 or wherever you get your podcasts.
And finally, a newborn baby boy has been found alive and well after he was kidnapped at a mall in Bellville, Cape Town over the weekend. Police tell News 24's Lisa Lee Solomons, though, that officers had pursued their leads to a home in Tafelsig, Mitchells Plain, where they found the 12-day-old baby. A 37-year-old woman has since been arrested for kidnapping. It's understood that the child's mom had felt nauseous at the mall when she left the baby in another woman's care to head to the bathroom, only to return to find that they were both gone. The suspects due in court soon. We'll update you on any developments there. From rugby rugby revelry to fuel price woes, it's Tuesday and we take the good news with the bad. Thanks so much for all of your voice notes. I really do appreciate it. Yesterday's edition, we asked Lesotho's happened to have gotten Starlink before South Africa. We spoke to specialist journalist Carol Payton. She explained that the real reasons behind this are rather complex. Many local regulatory hurdles have to be cleared first, so it might be up to 2 years until we realize Starlink in South Africa. Let's have a listen to some of your voice notes there.
People, whatever happens, do not bring Starlink into South Africa. Please. Why would Elon Musk want to team up with Donald Trump to bring Starlink to South Africa? Donald Trump, who painted South Africans as bad people because of the alleged fake pictures that were floating around. We were not even South African pictures, bro. Now all of a sudden we were wrong. So I think it's unfair to do business with Elon Musk because he's too closely linked with Donald Trump.
My voice note related to Starlink. Well, it's Cyril is letting the country down. He's putting these guys are lining their pockets before what benefits the country. I think also the other thing could be Telkom and other ISPs. are feeling threatened by Starlink. I just think we need to play ball. It makes me think how many other companies want to do business, but because BEE, those opportunities have been denied. But I just think the next elections, guys, we need to take things seriously. That trip in America was wasted. He's talking about foreign direct investment, wara. But domestic issues, guys, not here. This guy is just a clown.
Honestly don't care about Starlink. Elon Musk has been trying to sabotage South Africa ever since. So even Zimbabwe can get Starlink before South Africa. All the other countries.
Is it the case that South Africa is wanting to take more precautions when it comes to accepting any international sort of technological intervention or operation? In that, for Lesotho, it was more so about how can they, financially benefit from this program.
That Starlink thing is not for the good of Africans, bro. It's not for the good of black people or African as a whole. It's just for Elon Musk to enrich himself. Everything he has ever created or done is never for the benefit of the humanity or the people. It's just a way to enrich himself. That's it. There's nothing better to define it. Otherwise, there are there are local broadcasters which deserves to be funded and to be supported to be the best, which they can they can like be spreaded worldwide even. Because this thing, instead of coming up with Starlink, why not fund or sponsor SABC to become the greatest broadcaster in the whole continent of Africa, instead of coming with your own personal thing or individual thing just as a way of making money. In South Africa, they shouldn't allow this thing. What's going to do, Melantry?
Isn't it that Starlink was in South Africa before? Actually, most people didn't recognize or notice it. So I think Starlink has been there for a long time and doing some deals.
Please do keep them coming. You can send your thoughts and opinions to our official The Lead WhatsApp line on 072 562 3179. We've got 2 more editions this week. Hit the follow and subscribe buttons on Spotify, Apple and YouTube to be notified of when they're dropped. My name's Graham Robenheimer, and so long as there's rugby, we'll have The Lead.